I sat by the window, watching the clouds drift by as the plane began its descent. My heart was racing. It had been 30 years since I last saw the familiar skyline of Spokane. As the city came into view, memories of my life with Lisa flooded back. Our first meeting, our wedding day, the house we built together. All these moments played like an old movie in my mind. The plane landed with a gentle bump, and I quickly gathered my things. Stepping off the plane, I took a deep breath of the cool, fresh air. The airport was busy, filled with people hurrying to their destinations. I scanned the crowd, hoping to spot Lisa, but instead, a man in a dark coat approached me. "Alan Roberts?" he asked, his voice steady and serious. "Yes, that's me," I replied, wondering who he could be. "We need to talk," he said, leading me to a quieter corner of the terminal. "Who are you?" I asked, feeling a knot form in my stomach. "My name is John," he said, looking me straight in the eye. "There's something you need to know about your wife, Lisa." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What is it?" "She's been having an affair," he said plainly, "with a man named Elroy Masonroe." I stood there, stunned. The words didn't seem real. "What are you talking about?" I finally managed to ask. "I know this is a shock," John continued, "but I have proof. I've been looking into this for a while. I'm sorry to be the one to tell you." My mind was spinning. I couldn't believe it. Lisa, the woman I had loved and trusted for so many years, had betrayed me. "I need to see her," I said, my voice barely more than a whisper. John nodded. "I understand. Here's my number," he said, handing me a card. "Call me if you need anything." I took the card and turned to leave. My car was parked at the airport, and the drive home felt like the longest I had ever taken. I replayed John's words over and over in my head, trying to make sense of them. Could it be true? How had I not seen any signs? When I finally pulled into our driveway, the house looked the same as always. It was a small comfort in a world that suddenly felt upside down. I walked up to the front door, hesitated for a moment, then opened it. "Lisa," I called out, my voice echoing in the quiet house. "In the kitchen," she replied cheerfully. I found her standing by the stove, stirring a pot of soup. She turned and smiled when she saw me. "Welcome home, Ellen," she said, coming over to give me a hug. I stepped back, looking at her closely. "We need to talk," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Her smile faded. "What is it?" I took a deep breath. "I know about Elroy," I said, watching her reaction. Her eyes widened in shock, and she took a step back. "Alan, Just tell me the truth," I interrupted, feeling a lump in my throat. She looked down at the floor, tears welling up in her eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I never wanted to hurt you." "How long?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Years," she admitted, her voice barely audible. The weight of her words hit me like a ton of bricks. I turned and walked out of the kitchen, needing some air. I stood on the porch, staring out at the yard, trying to make sense of everything. Lisa followed me outside. "Alan, please, let's talk about this," she pleaded. I shook my head, unable to look at her. "I need some time," I said, my voice hollow. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I understand." As I stood there, the reality of my homecoming hit me. Everything had changed. The life I thought I knew was gone, and I had no idea what to do next. I couldn't sleep that night. My mind was racing with questions, and the weight of betrayal pressed down on me like a heavy blanket. The next morning, I decided to meet John again. I needed answers, and he seemed to be the only one who could provide them. We met at a small cafe near the airport. John was already seated, a cup of coffee in front of him. He looked up as I approached and gestured for me to sit. "Ellen," he said, his voice calm but serious. "I'm glad you came." "I need to know everything," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "How long has this been going on? How did you find out?" John nodded. "I understand. It's a lot to take in. He reached into his bag and pulled out a folder, placing it on the table between us. I've been investigating Elroy for a while now. Your wife's name came up in the process. I opened the folder and saw pictures of Lisa with Elroy. They were at a restaurant, walking in the park, even entering a hotel. Each photo felt like a dagger to my heart. It's been going on for years, John continued. They were careful, but not careful enough. I closed the folder, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. Why are you telling me this? I asked. What do you get out of it? John looked me in the eye. I'm a private investigator. I was hired to look into Elroy for another case. When I found out about your wife, I felt you deserved to know the truth. I took a deep breath, trying to process everything. What do I do now? I asked, feeling lost. That's up to you, John said gently. But you have the right to know the truth and decide what to do with it. I nodded, standing up. Thank you, I said, shaking his hand. I appreciate you telling me. As I walked out of the cafe, I felt a sense of resolve. I needed to confront Lisa again, but this time, I needed answers. When I got home, Lisa was sitting on the couch, her eyes red from crying. She looked up as I entered, her expression a mix of guilt and fear. Ellen, she began, but I held up my hand. Don't, I said, my voice firm. I need to know why. Why did you do it? She looked down, tears streaming down her face. I don't know, she whispered. It just happened. That's not good enough, I said, my anger rising. We had a life together, a family. Why throw it all away? Lisa sobbed, covering her face with her hands. I never wanted to hurt you, she cried. I was lonely, and Elroy. He made me feel alive again. I felt a pang of sadness at her words. We could have worked through it, I said quietly. But you chose to betray me instead. She looked up, her eyes filled with regret. I know, she whispered. I'm so sorry. I turned away, unable to look at her. I need some time to think, I said, heading towards the door. Ellen, please, she called after me, but I didn't stop. I needed space, and I needed to figure out what to do next. As I walked through the neighborhood, memories of happier times flooded my mind. I knew things would never be the same, but I had to find a way to move forward. For myself, and for the life I still had ahead of me. The next few days were a blur. I spent most of my time wandering aimlessly around town, trying to make sense of everything. My mind kept replaying John's words and the images in the folder. It felt like I was living in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Eventually, I knew I had to confront Lisa again, this time with a clear head and a plan. I returned home late in the afternoon. The house was quiet, except for the ticking of the old clock in the hallway. Lisa was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a cup of coffee. She looked up as I entered, her eyes filled with worry. Ellen, she said softly, I'm glad you're back. We need to talk. I nodded, pulling out a chair and sitting down across from her. Yes, we do. She took a deep breath. I've been thinking a lot about what you said, and I know I can't change what I did, but I want to make things right. I love you, Ellen. I always have. I looked at her, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. Lisa, if you loved me, why did you betray me? Why did you turn to Elroy? She bit her lip, tears forming in her eyes. I was lonely, Ellen. You were always away, and I felt so alone. Elroy was there, and it just happened. I never meant for it to go this far. That's not an excuse, I said, my voice rising. You had a choice. You could have talked to me. But instead, you chose to cheat. She reached out to touch my hand, but I pulled away. I know, and I'm so sorry. I regret it every day. I sighed, leaning back in my chair. Regret doesn't change anything, Lisa. We can't go back to the way things were. She nodded, wiping away her tears. I understand. But please, can we at least try to work through this? For us, for our family. I looked at her, my heart heavy. I don't know if I can, Lisa. Trust is something that once broken is hard to rebuild. She nodded again, her face a mask of sadness. I know, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes. Counseling, therapy, anything. I stood up, feeling overwhelmed. I need some time to think about all of this. As I turned to leave, she called out, Aylin, please. Just know that I love you, and I'm sorry. I paused at the door, looking back at her. I need some time. I repeated, then walked out. I drove aimlessly for a while, my mind a storm of emotions. Eventually, I found myself at a park we used to visit when the kids were younger. I sat on a bench, watching families play and couples walk hand in hand. I felt a pang of longing for the simplicity of those days. Hey, mind if I sit? A voice said, breaking through my thoughts. I looked up to see John standing there, holding 2 cups of coffee. Sure, I said, motioning for him to sit. He handed me a cup and took a seat beside me. How are you holding up? I shrugged. Honestly, I don't know. I'm angry, hurt, and confused. John nodded, sipping his coffee. It's understandable. Betrayal cuts deep. I looked at him, feeling a surge of gratitude. Thanks for telling me the truth. It wasn't easy to hear, but I needed to know. He nodded. You're welcome. Sometimes, the truth is the only way to move forward. We sat in silence for a while, watching the world go by. Finally, I turned to John. What would you do if you were in my shoes? He thought for a moment. I can't tell you what to do, Alan, but I can tell you this. You need to decide what will make you happy. Whether it's trying to rebuild your marriage or moving on, it's up to you. I nodded, feeling a sense of clarity. Thanks, John. I appreciate your honesty. He stood up, clapping me on the shoulder. Anytime, Alan. Remember, you don't have to go through this alone. As he walked away, I took a deep breath, feeling a sense of resolve. I didn't have all the answers, but I knew I needed to take things one step at a time. For now, that meant giving myself the space to figure out what I truly wanted and needed. The days following our confrontation were some of the hardest I'd ever faced. I moved out of the house and stayed with my friend Tom, who welcomed me without questions. He was a good guy, and I knew he'd give me the space I needed. Tom's spare room was small but cozy. As I lay on the bed staring at the ceiling, the weight of the situation settled on me. The woman I had loved and trusted for so many years had betrayed me. My life had changed overnight, and I wasn't sure how to deal with it. One evening, as I sat at the kitchen table nursing a beer, Tom joined me. How you holding up, Ellen? He asked, his voice full of concern. I shrugged, taking a sip. I don't know, Tom. It's like my whole world's been turned upside down. He nodded, sitting across from me. I can't imagine what you're going through, but you know you're welcome to stay here as long as you need. Thanks, I said, grateful for his support. I appreciate it. Tom leaned back in his chair. Have you thought about what you're going to do next? I sighed. I've been thinking about it nonstop. Lisa wants to try counseling, but I don't know if I can get past this. The trust is gone. Tom nodded thoughtfully. It's a tough situation, but whatever you decide, make sure it's what's best for you. The next day, I met with my lawyer to discuss the divorce. The office was cold and sterile, the smell of coffee lingering in the air. My lawyer, Mrs. Thompson, was a sharp, no-nonsense woman who had seen it all. Aylin, she began, looking over her glasses at me. I'm sorry you're going through this, but we need to discuss your options. I nodded, feeling a knot form in my stomach. What do I need to do? She pulled out some papers. First, we'll need to go over the assets, the house, any savings, and other possessions. We'll also discuss spousal support and any other financial arrangements. I listened as she laid out the steps, feeling overwhelmed by the sheer amount of details. I just want to get through this as quickly and painlessly as possible, I said, my voice tired. I understand, she replied gently, but it's important to be thorough. This is your future we're talking about. Later that evening, I called Lisa. We hadn't spoken much since I left, and I knew we needed to talk about the practicalities of the separation. "Hello," she answered, her voice hesitant. "Lisa, it's Alan. We need to discuss the divorce details." There was a long pause. "Okay, when can we meet?" "How about tomorrow afternoon at the house?" I suggested. "All right," she agreed, her voice barely above a whisper. The next day, I drove back to our house. It felt strange pulling into the driveway, knowing that soon it wouldn't be my home anymore. Lisa was waiting inside, looking tired and worn. We sat at the dining table, the same table where we had shared countless meals and memories. "Alan," she began, her voice trembling, "I know I've hurt you, and I'm so sorry. I want to make this right, whatever it takes." I looked at her, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. "Lisa, I just don't know if we can come back from this. But we need to figure out the details of the divorce." We spent the next hour discussing finances, the house, and how to tell the kids. It was one of the hardest conversations I'd ever had. Every word felt like a reminder of the life we were leaving behind. As I got up to leave, Lisa reached out and touched my arm. "Alan, please, just think about counseling. For us, for the kids." I looked at her, seeing the pain and regret in her eyes. "I'll think about it," I said, though I wasn't sure if I meant it. Driving away, I felt a strange sense of relief mixed with sorrow. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a while, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, I could find a way to move forward and rebuild my life. The days passed slowly after my meeting with Lisa. I spent most of my time at Tom's place, trying to figure out what to do next. The house was quiet, and the silence gave me too much time to think. I knew I needed to get out and start living my life again. One afternoon, Tom suggested we go to a local coffee shop. "You need to get out, Alan," he said, patting me on the back. "Sitting around here isn't doing you any good." He was right. I needed a change of scenery, and maybe even some new faces. We drove to the cafe, a cozy little place with wooden tables and the rich smell of fresh coffee. As we walked in, the barista greeted us with a warm smile. "Hey, Tom. Long time no see," she said, her eyes twinkling. "Hey, Judy. This is my friend Alan." Tom introduced us. "He's new in town." Judy extended her hand. "Nice to meet you, Alan. What can I get you?" I shook her hand, feeling a spark of warmth in her friendly demeanor. "Nice to meet you too, Judy. I'll just have a black coffee, thanks." As Judy prepared our drinks, Tom and I found a table by the window. "Judy's great," Tom said, leaning back in his chair. "She's been working here for years. Always has a smile for everyone." I nodded, feeling a bit more at ease. When Judy brought our coffees over, she sat down with us for a moment. "So, Alan, what brings you to our little corner of the world?" I hesitated, not sure how much to share. I needed a change. I said simply, "Life's been a bit complicated." Judy nodded, her expression understanding. "I get that. Sometimes a fresh start is exactly what you need." As the days turned into weeks, I found myself visiting the cafe more often. Judy and I struck up a friendship, and I found comfort in our conversations. She had a way of making everything seem a little bit brighter. One evening, after the cafe had closed, Judy invited me to join her for a walk. "I know a great spot by the lake," she said. "It's beautiful at sunset." We walked along the path, the sky painted with hues of orange and pink. The cool breeze felt refreshing, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of peace. "Thank you for this," I said, turning to Judy. I didn't realize how much I needed it. She smiled. Sometimes all it takes is a little change of scenery and some good company. We continued our walk, talking about everything and nothing. Judy told me about her family, her love for baking, and her dream of opening her own cafe one day. I shared stories of my time in the Marines and the places I'd seen. Must have been tough, being away for so long, Judy said, her voice soft. It was, I admitted. But coming back and finding out about Lisa, that was harder. Judy reached out and squeezed my hand. I'm so sorry, Alan. No one deserves that kind of betrayal. Her kindness touched me deeply. Thank you, Judy. Your friendship means a lot to me. As the sun dipped below the horizon, we made our way back to the cafe. Standing outside, Judy turned to me with a hopeful look in her eyes. You know, Alan, you don't have to go through this alone. I'm here for you. I smiled, feeling a warmth spread through my chest. Thank you, Judy. That means more to me than you know. In the weeks that followed, Judy and I grew closer. Our walks became a regular thing, and her presence brought a sense of normalcy back into my life. She encouraged me to pursue new interests, and I even started helping out at the cafe. It felt good to be busy, to have a purpose. One evening, as we closed up the cafe, Judy turned to me with a shy smile. Alan, I've been thinking, maybe we could go out for dinner sometime. Just the two of us. I felt a flutter of excitement. I'd like that, Judy. I'd like that a lot. Our first date was simple but perfect. We talked for hours, laughing and sharing stories. By the end of the night, I realized that Judy had brought something back into my life that I thought I had lost forever. Hope. As we walked back to the cafe, hand in hand, I knew that this was just the beginning of something new and beautiful. Judy had helped me see that even after the darkest storm, there could still be a rainbow. And for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to embrace the future, whatever it might hold. Life with Judy brought a renewed sense of purpose and joy I hadn't felt in years, but there was still a part of me that felt lost, searching for something more. That something came knocking in the form of John, the private investigator who had uncovered Lisa's affair. One morning, as Judy and I were opening the cafe, my phone buzzed. It was a message from John. Alan, we need to talk. Meet me at Camp Rollins at 2 p.m. Who's that? Judy asked, noticing my concerned expression. It's John, I replied. He wants to meet. Says it's important. Judy looked at me with curiosity. Do you want me to come with you? I shook my head. No, I think I need to handle this on my own. But thank you. The drive to Camp Rollins took me through winding country roads, the scenery gradually shifting from suburban to rural. When I arrived, I found John waiting at the entrance. He waved me over, a serious look on his face. Thanks for coming, Alan, he said, shaking my hand. No problem, I replied. What's this about? Walk with me, he said, leading me through the camp. I've been thinking about you a lot lately, about what you've been through and what you're looking for. We passed groups of veterans engaging in various activities. Some were working on art projects, others were tending to a community garden. There was a sense of camaraderie and purpose that was palpable. These men and women, John said, gesturing around us, they've all faced their own battles, both on the field and off. Camp Rollins gives them a place to heal and find new purpose. I nodded, understanding where he was going. And you think I could find that here? John stopped and looked me in the eye. I know you could. You have a wealth of experience, Alan. You could help these people, and in turn, find your own healing. We reached a small building at the edge of the camp, which housed the administrative offices. Inside, John introduced me to the camp director, a grizzled but warm-hearted man named Frank. Alan, it's good to meet you, Frank said, shaking my hand firmly. John's told me a lot about you. We could use someone like you around here. I felt a sense of belonging I hadn't experienced in a long time. I appreciate that, Frank. What would you need me to do? Frank smiled. We have a lot of programs: physical training, counseling, mentorship. Your military background and leadership skills could be invaluable. The idea excited me. I'd like to help any way I can. Later that evening, I returned to the cafe and found Judy closing up. She looked up, her face lighting up with a smile. How did it go? I pulled her into a hug. I think I found something I've been looking for. They want me to help out at Camp Rollins." Judy's eyes sparkled with pride. "That's wonderful, Alan. I knew you'd find your way." In the weeks that followed, I dove headfirst into my new role at Camp Rollins. I led physical training sessions, shared my experiences with younger veterans, and offered a listening ear to those who needed it. Every day brought new challenges, but also new rewards. One afternoon, I sat with a young vet named Mike, who had just joined the camp. He was struggling with the transition back to civilian life, much like I had. "It's tough, man," Mike said, his voice heavy with emotion. "I don't know if I'll ever feel normal again." I nodded, understanding his pain. "I know how you feel. I went through the same thing. But you're not alone. We're here for you, and we'll get through this together." Mike looked at me, his eyes filled with gratitude. "Thanks, Alan. That means a lot." As the days turned into weeks, I found a deep sense of fulfillment in helping others. My life had taken a turn I never expected, but it felt right. With Judy by my side and a new purpose guiding me, I knew I was on the path to healing. One evening, as Judy and I sat by the lake, watching the sunset, she turned to me and said, "You seem different, Alan. Happier." I smiled, feeling a warmth in my chest. "I am, Judy. For the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." She leaned her head on my shoulder, and we sat in comfortable silence, watching the sky turn shades of pink and orange. In that moment, I knew that no matter what the future held, I was ready to face it with a renewed sense of hope and purpose. The weeks at Camp Rollins turned into months, and with each passing day, I felt more at peace. My role at the camp was fulfilling, and the camaraderie with other veterans provided a sense of belonging I hadn't felt in years. Judy's unwavering support was a constant source of strength. One morning, as I was wrapping up a physical training session with a group of vets, Frank approached me with a grin. "Alan, got a minute?" I nodded, wiping the sweat from my brow. "Sure thing, Frank. What's up?" Frank motioned for me to follow him. We walked toward the administrative building, the morning sun casting long shadows on the ground. "I've been thinking," he began, "we could use someone like you in a more permanent leadership role here." I stopped, taken aback. "You mean, like a full-time position?" Frank nodded. "Yes, you've made a real difference, Alan. The guys respect you, and you've got the experience we need. What do you say?" The offer filled me with a mix of excitement and gratitude. "I'd be honored, Frank." "Thank you." He clapped me on the back. "Good to hear. Let's make it official." Later that evening, I shared the news with Judy. We were sitting on the porch of her cozy home, a gentle breeze rustling the leaves of the trees surrounding us. "Judy, I got some news," I said, unable to hide my excitement. She looked at me with curiosity. "What is it?" "Frank offered me a full-time leadership position at the camp." I accepted. Her face lit up with a smile. "That's wonderful, Alan. I'm so proud of you." I took her hand, feeling a deep sense of contentment. "I couldn't have done it without you, Judy. Your support means everything to me." She leaned in and kissed me gently. "We make a good team, don't we?" "Yes, we do," I replied, squeezing her hand. "And I have an idea." "Oh, what's that?" she asked, her eyes twinkling with curiosity. "How would you feel about expanding the cafe? Maybe even opening a second location near the camp? The vets love your coffee and treats, and I think it could be a great addition to the community." Judy's eyes widened with excitement. "I'd love that. It's something I've dreamed about for a long time." "Then let's make it happen," I said, feeling a sense of purpose and partnership. In the weeks that followed, Judy and I began planning the expansion of the cafe. We scouted locations, worked on the menu, and enlisted the help of some of the veterans from the camp to get the place ready. The sense of community and shared effort was invigorating. One evening, after a long day of preparations, we sat outside the new cafe location, looking out at the stars. Mike, the young vet I had spoken with months ago, joined us. "Looks like you guys have been busy," Mike said, smiling. "Yeah, it's been a lot of work, but it's worth it," I replied. Mike nodded, his expression thoughtful. "You know, Alan, I've been thinking about what you said when I first got here. About finding a new purpose. I think I've found mine." "That's great to hear, Mike," I said, genuinely pleased. "What are you planning?" "I want to go back to school," he said, determination in his voice. "Study psychology. Maybe even work with vets like us someday." "That's a fantastic idea," Judy said, her eyes shining with pride. "You'd be great at it, Mike." He smiled, looking a bit embarrassed, but clearly touched by our support. "Thanks. I'm really excited about it." As we sat there, talking and dreaming about the future, I realized how far I had come. The pain and betrayal of the past still lingered, but they no longer defined me. With Judy by my side, a fulfilling role at the camp, and a thriving cafe, I had built a new life filled with hope and purpose. Moving forward wasn't about forgetting the past. It was about embracing the present and building a future worth living. And with the support of friends and loved ones, I knew that anything was possible. Looking up at the stars, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to face whatever came my way. Together, we were stronger, and together, we would continue to move forward,